what is it that we have to assassinate people's characters and people's, livelihood and their calling within our own denomination? Like, can't we have a bigger tent than that?
Today, we want to give an update on the case with Will McRaney, who has filed a lawsuit against the North American Mission Board. Now, the facts of that case have not been presented in court yet, although the North American Mission Board has continued to delay the discovery of those facts and has continued to push that back with different kinds of court appeals. Now, we're not going to go into all the details on all of those, but they have basically been rejected by the court 4 different times at this juncture. What we want to do is we want to talk about what are the next steps. Now, since the summary judgment came down against NAMB, and everything happened since the Supreme Court, it threw the initial case off track as far as the initial scheduling. So the court has not yet issued a new scheduling order with all the details. The assumption is that they will just basically move everything down 6 or 8 months on the court docket. Mm-hmm. But at this point, they have started several things. And one of the things we know they have started is they have already started moving forward on discovery. And the only date that has been set has been the actual trial date. And the trial date has been set for April of 2023. So April of 2023. So the first part of the discovery process is a request of documents, which relates to the facts of the case. And again, there have been no facts presented thus far in almost 5 years of this case, kind of not even unraveling itself, but just going back and forth in the courts because of the continual delays by the North American Mission Board. So fellows, let's jump in here. I want to talk a little bit about this discovery process. And there are 3 more things that I want us to identify that we have clearly identified as next steps in this case. And we'll get to those in a moment. But let's first deal with this issue of discovery and the request for documents. What kind of documents do you think, number one, Dr. McRaney needs to request of NAMB to try to support the facts of this case and what he said? And he's been very public about what he said. And then what kind of documents do you think should be requested from Dr. McRaney by North American Mission Board?
Obviously, the contention is that the North American Mission Board, in particular Kevin Ezell and whoever was his vice president, interfered in an adversarial manner with McRaney's employment over disagreements about how to partner. So, I mean, I would want to have all the documents that related to what the original partnerships were. Any document that, whether it's text, email, about the conversations between the board of directors or the trustees at Maryland, and to understand how they communicated their displeasure with McRaney and his team, what, if any, financial withholdings that would have been contrary to agreed upon partnership, because ultimately we're sent, it's like almost like the federal government. We send our taxes there and they send money back to the state of Indiana or Tennessee or Georgia, and then they spend money on Medicare, on education and other programs, and the state also collects taxes as well. So that's kind of a thing there. The federal government is not the state, and we know that even from our Constitution, our law. And the same thing goes for NAMB. A lot of our entities are organized that way. They're independent. And so how much undue political pressure was put upon Maryland, especially if Will had a great review and they were pleased with his view. So what was the real point of contention?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I would want if I was Will McRaney, is some of those conversations of his review right before he was let go. What did the convention honestly say about his job performance? Was it up to par? Was it what they wanted? Have that documented, along with anything from NAMB and the rest of the board, the Maryland Delaware board, to say what happened between that review that was so good and being terminated, because the Maryland Delaware, their convention has the right to terminate their leader.
Correct.
That's
and McRaney has never debated that.
right.
Right.
He's publicly
So
said
the question
they
is,
have that right, even though he had a good
Right.
review, et cetera, et cetera. He's talking about the unfair influence.
right. So
the-
that's
the
what I would
interference.
ask is, what was that conversation between NAMB and some of those at Maryland, Delaware, who were decision makers to even bring it up that he would be removed? And then another thing that I would ask for, especially since this case hinges upon NAMB keeping him from being employed, or whenever he was asked to speak at some of those conferences and so forth, what was the conversation? What were the emails, the text between Kevin Ezell and those organizers
Right.
who had already put him on the program and then had him removed?
Now you're
I
talking
think-
about in Florida when
Right.
he was asked. Kevin Ezell called his friend Jimmy Scroggins and had him be an intermediary basically, and have McRaney removed from, I believe it was the pastors conference, the Florida pastors conference,
Mhm.
that he had been asked to speak there on their program in a workshop or something. And he found out, about that. McRaney found out about it. And so that was after,
So
that
then
was
that's
after he had
keeping-
left.
Right.
yeah.
That's keeping him from being employed after he had already been removed.
Yeah, which is torturous interference according to US law. That's torturous interference. Yeah.
So those are some of those documents that I would want to have in my hand. Is what was the text messaging and the emails that were going back and forth between these leaders and Kevin Ezell that kept him from being gainfully employed after he had already been verbally offered this speaking position.
When we had this big thing at the convention about the sex scandal, the worrying about that, and the level at which the people found distrust and concern over that, we have to make sure we can build credibility. And I don't necessarily blame the lawyers for seeking to limit discovery, to push back. That's their job. That's the way our legal system works. But I'm just very still perplexed as to what brought forth the acrimony towards Will and Ezell, why he'd be chasing after opportunities Will have. Like, what does Ezell care? What did McRaney do that was worthy of Ezell? If Ezell didn't interfere, and it was simply the Maryland decision to release him from employment, then why is Ezell even getting involved in any other way beyond that? Okay, the guy didn't fit in that role. I have what I want. He's not going to be hired as a state exec anywhere else, probably. Let him go be a professor. Let him go teach. What is it about that mentality of a character assassination? If these things are found to be true, that's a much more disturbing thing in general, that somebody with so much power would seek to destroy that. But how did this whole thing start? I mean, if Will left and was like, okay, they had a right to fire me, and he's out there doing nothing, and all of a sudden he gets dinged constantly because there's no reason to fire him, as far as I understand, besides they didn't like the direction he wanted to go. It was just about direction, not about character, not about anything else.
Right.
Not so. What is it that we have to assassinate people's characters and people's livelihood and their calling within our own denomination? Like, can't we have a bigger tent than that?
Well, it seems to be the pattern of behavior that we've seen over the last, actually the last 10 plus years since the GCR passed and Ezell took over at North American Mission Board, that there's a pattern of retribution. So the accusation, which McRaney has provided documentation of through letters and emails and other things that he's already published, he's published them on his website, show that there was undue influence in him
Right.
being removed in Maryland, Delaware, and that there was interference, that the whole thing flipped and changed. And much like my situation in Michigan, when I had the conflict, we had different views of how church planting should take place. We had different views of how that all should be happening within our state. And my argument, as I'm sure it was Will's as well, was I know my state way better than what anybody in Alpharetta, Georgia know it. And I have people all around me who are associational missionaries and pastors and others who know our state better. And we're not interested in a cookie cutter approach. And so basically, when the financial threats were made in Maryland, Delaware, that they were going to withhold $1 million or $1 million plus of the financial funding that helped to pay for their staff support and others, our partner, they weren't fully paying for it by any means, but partially paying for that in a partnership agreement between Maryland, Delaware, and the North American Mission Board. When they said they're going to withdraw that if they don't terminate McRaney, then the leadership at BCMD decided, hey, look, we need that money, which is another issue about motives, but we need that money and we're going to release McRaney. And that took place at that point. So back to our initial kind of question about the documents and what we would want to see. Right. I've just kind of come around the corner there again, back to the Baptist Convention of Maryland, Delaware. And here's what really could potentially happen if that is the case, if there has been something destroyed. And I don't know if it has. I have no way of knowing that. But if it were discovered that, and documents were also requested, text messages, printed documents, emails, transcriptions of phone calls, et cetera, for those leaders at the BCMD, and you end up putting all that together and realize that there are things that are missing from what's being provided by the North American Mission Board that are present at BCMD, that'd be a huge deal. And
yeah, that's what concerns me, that we would, again, you have disagreements. And so even if Will did a good job in BCMD's mind, but they saw a better view that Will didn't want to be participating in, you could say, okay, we see why they released him. But then why did NAMB go after? Why did Ezel make personal phone calls? Why did they contact Will? Like, what was there to contact Will over? It was like, I call it good shooting by a cop, right? He got shot. You know, it was a good shooting. Why? And this is where discovery does matter.
I don't think NAMB or anybody else intended for there to be 4 court cases, 5 ended up in the Supreme Court. I think this whole thing's been like a cheap piece of meat. The longer you chew on it, the bigger it gets. I think they realized pretty close to the time that they're starting to let McRaney put pressure on him to get him out. Even being up in Michigan, because I was a pastor up in Michigan whenever the whole partnership agreement stuff. I think when NAMB and the convention bit down onto the Great Commission Resurgence thing, the GCR agreement, I think that's whenever we started taking a mouthful of something we didn't like. We didn't know that we weren't going to like it.
Right.
It's just grown to the point where, man, we should have never been eating on this. But because now you've got uncontrolled spending in church planting, you've got inappropriate relationships and gifts and all kinds of other things that I've read documents on. NAMB owning so much property, it looks like we're in the real estate business. Just stuff that you never started out doing.
Right.
And I think as far as documents, I'm not so sure. I wouldn't want to go back to the beginning of GCR and find out, what was in some of these conversations with the Great Commission Resurgence that has led us to this point.
Okay, unpack that for just a second. So you mentioned the GCR and a significant shift. I think most who are following Southern Baptist life and work would say that that was a significant shift, especially in the way North American Mission Board was operating. But you just brought up the work of the GCR task force that presented that to the convention in Orlando when that was presented. I mean, should part of these documents that are being requested be those documents that have been sealed that show the history and the background of why all of a sudden GCR is passed and this insane kind of a shift in implementation in the way we're doing missions, and literally, in my view, moving to an approach that lacks missional strategy. The
I would
kinds
say
of things they're
yes, we
doing
do.
in church planting does not have solid missional strategy behind it in many cases. There are some.
I would say, and again, this is one of those, I believe, strategy points that when you throw Great Commission on front of just about anything and
Right.
present it rather quickly, people are going to sign up, because who on earth wants to be said as you're the one opposed
Right.
to the Great Commission? Which is like what we've mentioned in some of these previous speeches that we've done here, where we talk about prayer. Well, that's a strategy at some of the conventions. You know, things get heated. Well, let's go into a prayer session, because who's
Right.
going to oppose prayer? And it
Right.
eats up precious conversation time, because nobody's going to want to be the one to oppose prayer.
Right.
Well, with the Great Commission resurgence, what was it in those original meetings that led one of our institutions, North American Mission Board, to go before the Supreme Court and say they are over other entities, which could potentially lead to them being over local churches, local
Right.
pastors? What was it in the beginning
Right.
that led to our own entity saying they are the mission board for the Southern Baptist Convention?
Correct.
Right.
Like the question is, what is the driving force? What is the thought that, see, there's a disagreement, like, when there's disunity and dysfunction, oftentimes it's either because you have different views on life and you're going to separate anyway, or there's a lack of clarity and unity because there are things unsaid and manipulation going on. And that's the question I have, is why the manipulation if we're all agreed in the Great Commission resurgence? And like you said, Bert, the problem is that the adjectives are Great Commission and people hear that as the noun. We're doing the Great Commission. The resurgence, that is the noun. And people don't focus on what does that noun, what's loaded in that made ERLC or NAM or anybody say, we're over these independent entities, these groups that they partner with us, but they are not owned by us. We actually respond to their stakeholders there. They reversed everything. So if that mentality is there, where'd that come from? That's not a Southern Baptist mentality. It's not congregational mentality. It's not Rhode Island, the way that it was built with Roger Williams. It's not how we as Baptists traditionally look at life. It's very much more hierarchical. It's very much like the Catholic Church mentality, Presbyterian Church, and all these things that we complained about in the conservative resurgence. We don't want to have that. If it wasn't for the ground swelling up, protecting the doctrine, protecting the church from the elites, what happened to where we see kind of an elitism now feeling empowered to push down on the other entities that we thought we kind of recovered the Bible, but also recovered the polity that really makes us unique as Southern Baptists. That's my question. Like, how do you? I can't reconcile what I see with what I know what it means to be Baptist polity wise, and what has been going on in the history, and the lack of communication as to why they did it. Like, and I do know that there are people who said when they asked Kevin Ezell, do you want us to participate as states with church planting? And when they asked him directly, he said, no, not really. Basically, you do your thing, and we're going to plant churches. You don't need to know who they are, really. We're going to do it our way. Good, peace be to you. You go your track,
Well,
we go our track.
and the case is now, our states do not know how many churches are being supported because NAM won't release that information. Our state conventions do not know how many churches are being supported in their individual state. And that's all happened since Ezell came on board, because like when I was associational missionary and when I was a state executive director to start with, the reality was I knew every month how many of the church planters in my area were receiving support from NAM, how much it was, how much our state convention was kicking in, who the other partners were, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
But all of that's secretive now. And, you
Why?
know, it's, well, because they won't release it. There's been
But
no
no, I'm saying
transparency.
like there's got to be some.
Right.
So
You're asking, why
the-
would they do that?
Right. And why? Because the McRaney thing would I would infer, again, I could be wrong,
Right.
that the McRaney level, what's going on in the Northwest Territory, the feelings that several different, and even some of our more established states are starting to go, hey, that's not what we signed on for. That there is an understanding they have that they thought was pretty clear, but there is a mode of operation and a marching order that is being, driving the other part of a partnership that's going in two different directions. And it seems like it doesn't seem that way. You could see the tension and the tearing apart of the fabric, and you're going, how is this going to be healthy? And I mean, I could see reasons why you don't want to have churches that are like, we have to wear skirts for women and men have got to have their hair part on the right side, with a more contemporary church plant, because they go after them, they complain, and they attack them. I can understand that part, but why wouldn't you want to have your state directors and your key cheerleaders for church planners involved and excited and offering partnership with them? I don't understand that part. Why it seems like,
well,
like
the pattern that seems to have surfaced, and that's kind of why I asked the question about going back to the GCR documents and the task force, if that should be revealed to see if where the core
Right.
of all of this has come from, because
Right.
that pattern of, as I often say, power, prestige, and position has really surfaced, and these kind of
Right.
elite leaders, the reputation of Kevin Ezell when he was pastor at Highland there has not been Highview, excuse me. Highview has not been good from former staff members and others that were there. But the reality is he came in just like a bull in a china closet, as they say. And anybody who stood against him, anybody who disagreed with him, was just to be removed. And that's basically what started taking place. And even after, we go back to where we kind of began a while ago, even after McRaney was removed, and he doesn't question that he was removed by the state convention, but it was under pressure, as has been given evidence from him at this point. Ezell posted McRaney's picture down in the welcome area at the North American Mission Board and said, "Don't have anything to do with this guy," or something.
Now that'd be interesting
quote.
If you can get testimony about that, if that
Well,
actually happened.
and there are people who were sitting at that desk and people who were there, and there's somebody who had to tape it up there and so forth. And I'm not sure that would be the highest on my list of people I want to call, but that is something that showed there was some retribution. There was some pushback. We don't want anything to do with this particular person. And from the case with McRaney and the case with me and a number of other executive directors and individuals, church planters and others that I'm aware of, they've got a target on them. They've got.
And you wonder why. I mean, like what could possibly be the benefit of wasting any time when you're dealing with a multi-million-dollar endeavor? You have hundreds of church planters, their families, their churches. You have 42 state conventions. You have trainings.
Why do you commit resources to try to follow people?
Right.
Yeah. It just makes no sense why they would be targeting people unless there is something about what the task force did. What did they say? How did they lay this out? What has been presented to the people like Ezell who have taken over in these key positions to say, this is what the end game is? There's something in those documents, it seems, That's why I asked the question, but it seems there's something in those documents from that task force that gave a mandate that some of these things should be taking place. And they may have a direct influence on what has been happening relative to Will McRaney in this specific case, but then also to a number of other individuals, some state directors who have now retired, who have now moved out of the way.
Mhm.
But I mean, there are documented cases of these things happening. Well, and we started down this rabbit hole talking about the request of documents that would be related to facts. And I think many of these things could shed light on those facts, the things that are there. We're on the outside, so none of us know what kind of things are going to be requested of McRaney from the North American Mission Board, or from North American Mission Board from McRaney. McRaney has obviously published an enormous amount of items, things that went back and forth, and things he received to kind of document, what he is trying to say and what his side of this whole thing is. Of course, now he's being fairly quiet because it is moving forward, and his attorneys are needing to handle things, that kind of thing. So we've got 3 more steps. So we're going to go ahead and look at the next 3 in just a moment, but let's take just a pause as we wrap up this request for documents under the first stage of discovery. And then let's come back in just a second and handle the rest.